Let me offer a little bit of an introduction here, and then maybe an opening prayer, and then we can get started. So my name is Heather Jocelyn Crinson. I'm a member of the New England Annual Conference Board of Discipleship. We are only in charge of stewardship and evangelism and Christian education and spiritual formation and worship. Like that's all that a board of discipleship does. Not very much. So we tried to focus on one theme every year. And this year we're finally come around to worship, which I'm very, very excited about. We've got a series of monthly sessions over Zoom, and our one today, led by Jason Moore, is on hybrid worship. We offered a survey last fall to get ideas what topics within worship are people interested in, and hybrid worship was at the top of the list. So we're so very grateful. Jason literally wrote the book on hybrid worship, and I'll put the title in the chat. It is called Both and: Maximizing Hybrid Worship Experiences for In-Person and Online participants. So I maybe got that last word wrong, but he also has written other books, one on AI and the church, for those who might be interested in that, and the Wired Church 2.0. So he's really working at the nexus of worship and technology and where we are in our culture right now. This book he shared came out of the experience of COVID. I'm sure you all remember that. I remember all of a sudden church was our pastor and my husband with 6 TV cameras that he borrowed from the TV station in town, and me playing organ and being the liturgist, and my daughter being the stand-in for all the children during the children's moment. And so, what do we do with this? I think a lot of us have been using live streaming and recording since then, but the opportunity to think seriously about it and use our thoughts about that reflected in how we lead worship is just a fantastic opportunity. So Jason, we are so, so very grateful for you. Let's pray together for a moment, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to Jason. Loving God, we are grateful that you can use so many different tools to reach hearts. We're grateful for this technology this evening that allows us to converse together and learn, for this opportunity to think through how we serve your people through Sunday worship, both in person and over the internet. God, we pray that you would bless Jason during this time, that you would give us ears open to hear and learn. Let your Spirit work through our conversation, and let us all come away from this inspired and feeling like we have new tools to serve our congregations. In your Son's holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Jason.
Well, thank you, Heather, for that introduction and for starting us off with prayer. One quick tip is that if you do not have your Zoom set to speaker mode or speaker view, that will be helpful in reading some of the graphics and things that I'm gonna put on the screen, because they'll be kind of small if you're seeing them in the gallery view with all of the participants. So you can change that out if you want to. But I am thrilled to have the opportunity to share with you tonight. As I said, for those of you who are on early, I've got way more material than we have time for. But I'm going to just try and squeeze it all in as best I can. And I'm going to try not to frustrate you by talking too fast. I'm going to start with a little fancy schmancy intro just to kick things off. And then we will get started. So here we go. So I wonder if anybody out there recognizes the reference that I used when I created that little clip. You can throw it in the chat if you want. Popular streaming series. I would imagine some of you have watched it. I'll give you one more clue. It just wrapped up. So the show Stranger Things, and when we got to the pandemic, it felt like everything was upside down. Some of you know Stranger Things to know about the upside down. We were living in times that were unlike anything. Let me ask by show of hands, how many of you were streaming before the pandemic? Was anybody online streaming worship? No? And how many of you went online with the pandemic? I'm going to guess that's most of us. Okay. So, the pandemic certainly was a terrible, awful thing in many ways, but it did move the church forward in ways that we might never have moved forward. And I would venture to guess that most of you really leaned in because you had no choice, but you leaned in and figured out in a matter of weeks how to do online worship. And what I have seen in the last, oh gosh, year or maybe year and a half is a lot of people kind of applying the brakes or just sort of letting go of some of the intentionality that they once had when it came to hybrid worship. And so tonight, I want to talk to you about 7 ways to increase engagement in your online or hybrid worship, because the truth is, most people who are going to come to your building at some point are going to start off as online worshipers. And if they like what they experience online, if they feel like they're a part of it, they are much more likely to come be with you in your physical space. And so the good news, the encouraging news tonight is that nothing I'm going to share with you is going to require you to spend more money, to add more staff, or to change your worship style. I'm going to give you a bunch of really simple but very effective tips to increase your engagement. If we haven't ever met, my name is Jason Moore. My ministry is Midnight Oil Productions. Some of you may be familiar with the church I got my start in ministry at. It's called Ginghamsburg United Methodist Church in near Dayton, Ohio, with Pastor Mike Slaughter. Mike is retired. I was on staff there in the late 90s when that church went from about 1,500 in attendance to a little over 3,000, and which is just kind of an unbelievable God thing. And so my entire ministry, I have been focused on how do we communicate the gospel using the latest technology, not for the sake of technology, but for the sake of effectiveness. And so as you heard Heather say a moment ago, my most recent book is called AI in the Church. So I am interested in the intersection of how do we navigate a world with AI, but how do we navigate our faith and so on. But my book, Both And, came out about a year into the pandemic because, well, over the course of the pandemic, and your conference hosted this too, I had the opportunity to do a training when the world shut down. 52 conferences had me do a training called Telling the Old Story in a New Time. And the whole idea was, how do we do non-physical worship? Because at that time, we couldn't even be in our buildings. And as time went on, I started to get really concerned about what happens after the pandemic is over and we start to have people in the room, but we still have people online. And what I suspected was going to happen actually did happen in a lot of churches. And that is, friends, that when we were only online during the pandemic, this is what worship felt like. I was talking to the camera, you feel me talking to you, and so on. And then what happened was we started putting people back in the room. And here's what happened in worship. I started talking to the room, and I kind of forgot that you were there online. Imagine if I did our entire hour like this. This is what some of your people experience in your online worship, is that it doesn't really feel like you're talking to them. It feels like you're talking to the room. And so when I say both and, what I mean is that we are creating an experience of worship for people both physically gathered and digitally gathered where no one feels like an afterthought. It's the best way I can think of to give you a picture of what I mean when I say that is to think about any professional sporting event that you watch on television or you go to in person. If you go to the stadium, it's a different experience. You're there with other fans. You experience the energy of the crowd. You have your own cameras built in because you can look around. There's just a different experience. I'm not suggesting that they're the same thing, but also there are advantages to watching the game on your television. You have cheaper snacks and less disgusting restrooms, most likely. You get to pick who you sit with. There's all sorts of things. There are graphics projected on the television that you can't see when you're in the stadium. You've got commentators that explain things. And here's the thing, friends. If you watch the game at home, some of you just watched the Super Bowl, you feel like you're the primary audience. but the people that are in that stadium also feel like they're the primary audience. And I want to suggest to you that while worship isn't necessarily audiences, we can reach our entire congregation in a way that both the people online and the people in the room feel like they're a part of it. And I want to talk to you about how to do that. Now, I've actually had people say to me recently, Jason, can we stop doing this hybrid thing now?
What?
That's right, Princess Leia. I've heard people say that. And friends, I think that now more than ever, we have to double down on this hybrid thing. And we don't necessarily have to like this, but I just want you to think about the world that we live in now. How many of you, by show of hands, for those of you who have your cameras turned on, and again, I appreciate that you have done that so that I can see you. How many of you have ordered food on DoorDash? Anybody a DoorDasher out there, or have you ever ordered food to come to your house? Okay, at least a couple of you. How many of you have chosen to watch the movie on streaming rather than going to the theater? Anybody watch? Okay. Any of you take classes online? Get education that way rather than going to the classroom. Okay. My wife is a second grade teacher, and she did her entire degree online. The only time she was ever physically present with other people was when she walked for her diploma, her graduation. So friends, why would we think that the church is immune to this shift that's happened in our culture, in part because of COVID? We can participate. We now shop online. My wife, during COVID, signed up for this thing called ClickList, where she decides what groceries she wants. She goes online, clicks all the things, and then Kroger shows up and delivers them to our front porch. And I think it's like a $60 subscription. And she's like, it's worth $60 to not have to go into the grocery store anymore. So why would we think that worship is any different? People now have a choice of what they do. We don't have to love it. I would much rather be sitting in a room with you giving this presentation than sitting here in this hotel room. But now that we have this option, some of us are going to take advantage of it. So rather than fighting that some people now choose to worship online, I think we have to lean in and we have to do our best to engage. The gospel hasn't changed, but the way we deliver it has to look a little different in the world that we live in today. So Jesus talked about wine and wineskins, and I just think this is the wineskin of today. And it's not a replacement for in-person worship. And that's why I think hybrid is really an opportunity. I also think this is our opportunity to fulfill the Great Commission, because Jesus told us to take the gospel to the ends of the earth, right? And gosh, it's a lot easier to do that with online than to do it in the physical space. And so maybe this is a way that we get to fulfill the Great Commission in an interesting way. Now, I was cheering you on during the pandemic, and I saw some things that were so encouraging. I spent the first 20 years of my career, because I got my start at Ginghamsburg, trying to convince churches that it was okay to put screens in so that we could do, creative things and display song lyrics and all that kind of thing. And there was a lot of resistance to that. But I'll tell you, in a week or two, you all were like, we're installing cameras, and you just did whatever you had to do to get worship. It was incredible to watch. But I thought it'd be kind of fun to take a look back at some of the great moments in online innovative history for worship. And so here's some of the things that I've seen. You don't have to raise your hand if you did any of these, but here's what I saw during the pandemic. I call this first one the cheap seats. Somebody just threw a camera in the back of the room, and you really can't tell who's preaching. You have to just throw a magnifying glass on the screen. This next church took the opposite approach. I call this too close for comfort. You might want to trim your eyebrow hairs a little bit if you're going to get that close to the camera. And then let's see, what else do we have? We used whatever technology we could. I call this surveillance camera worship. We just found a security camera and broadcast it. And then this guy, he stepped out on his front porch and used his Ring doorbell. So whoever was monitoring his footage, this next church, I call this defying gravity. Sometimes it was just hard to get the camera turned the right way. And then toward the end of the pandemic, Zoom added these filters, and the filters would even be animated. And so some people did Zoom filtered worship.
I am not a cat. I am not a cat. I am not a cat.
Okay, so when this is over, go search on YouTube Zoom cat lawyer video, and you will laugh your head off because there was a lawyer who was appearing in court, and his granddaughter had been playing with Zoom, and she turned that cat filter on, and he was trying to argue his case in the mouth. Judge, I am not a cat. I am not a cat. And he's like, you have a filter on. He's like, and it's just so much fun to watch. So go watch that sometime, and you'll have fun with it. Um, we don't have time today with our limited schedule to do this poll, but I do want to put this up and for you to think about for a moment, what would your choice be? So I'll read this to you really quickly. If you had to identify which of these four options best describes your approach to hybrid worship, would it be A, your priorities on the people in the room, you stream, but your focus is really on creating an experience for the people in the room? Or B, we intentionally create an experience for people both in the room and online. We've adapted our practices in worship so that people at home and in person feel like they're an equal priority. Or C, maybe your online audience is your priority and you're happy to have people in the room, but you've streamlined everything so people online are most engaged. Or D, maybe you do an all digital service and you don't have anybody in the room, and so you're focused on that. My guess, based on the many times that I've done this presentation, is that most of you are sitting at A. Most of the time it's about 70 or 80% A, and then maybe about 20% B. There might be a couple others that are C, but the reality is we are creating an experience that is really meant for a physical audience, and we're not really giving that much thought to our online audience. And what some of us do is we kind of bookend the experience. So we'll do this. We'll come into worship. We'll say, good morning. Welcome to worship. We're so glad you're here. Oh, and to those of you online, thanks for coming. And that's really the last time we talk to them, except maybe at the very end, after the benediction or something, we might say, and thanks for coming. And friends, it's really easy if you're worshiping online to feel disconnect and like, I'm not even really a part of this. I'm just watching the people in the room worship. And I want to suggest to you that there are some ways that we can make worship feel like worship for people who are not physically there. Now, let me just address what I hear a lot. And that is there's this mentality that people who worship online are lazy, or they're uncommitted, or they really don't care, or they just want it to be easy, or whatever. Now, let me say, there are some people that worship online that are lazy and like to sleep in and like wearing pajamas and all those kinds of things, and they like their coffee and you don't let them bring it into your sanctuary. That's true. But I also want to suggest to you that not everyone that worships online is lazy and uncommitted and so on and so forth. Some of you have shut-ins, elderly who can't make it there, who would love to be in worship but can't be. Some of you heard me say at the beginning of our call today, my daughter is in the hospital right now. Long story, and a couple back in 25, she was diagnosed with a very rare medical condition, 1 in a million. Spent 25 days in the hospital over the course of that summer. And there were many Sundays where we worshiped from the hospital room. And our church was savvy enough to know that we were there. And so they would sometimes say, shout out to the Moores this morning and to Madeline, we're thinking about you and praying for you. And I'll tell you, for our family, that just meant the world. And what I want to suggest to you, friends, is that when you call out those people, it's not just a benefit for those people. It's a benefit for your congregation that's physically gathered, who knew that we weren't sitting where we sit oftentimes in worship, and that care about us as well. So we're going to jump into these 7 ways to create more engagement in our hybrid worship, and I hope that you'll hear a thing or two here that will be helpful for you. So the first way is that we really ought to create an intimate experience for everyone involved in worship. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that, again, without really giving it a lot of thought, the key word tonight is going to be intentionality, because all it takes is intentionality to make people at home feel like they're a part of it. So the first thing I want to suggest to you is that you really want to talk to people at home too, to look at the camera from time to time and make them feel like you're talking to them. Let me show you somebody who was around long before hybrid worship, but who was a master at this. If you want to get really good at it, there's someone you can study, and that is, here he comes, Mr. Rogers. He was so good at looking at the camera and talking to it, and he'd ask a question, and he'd give you time to think about your answer. I felt like when I was a kid, I visited with Mr. Rogers every day. Now, the difference between Mr. Rogers and you is that you have people in the room, and now sometimes Mr. McFeely would come over or whatever. He'd talk to them too. But the first thing that I want to encourage you to do is to talk to the camera sometimes. Not all the time, because you're not filming a television show. But here's what I would do if we were in worship. I would say, good morning, friends. I'm so glad to see those of you who are physically gathered, and we are so glad to see those of you who are worshiping with us online as well. And do you see the difference between what you feel when I'm doing this and I'm not talking to you, and then when I do this and I look at the camera, you feel something different. So one of the first things you can do that won't cost you a penny is to make sure you look at the camera. And I'm gonna give you a suggestion. If you're a pastor or a worship leader, put a camera icon in your notes. Put them at the top of every page. And that camera icon will help you remember to look directly at the camera occasionally while you are preaching or leading worship or whatever. Heather, you have your hand up.
I do. So I'm going to ask a question. What if you've got more than one camera?
Yeah.
Just because my husband is always over the top.
Yes, that's a great question. So there are a couple different options. One is that some cameras do have what's called a tally light, and sometimes we have those turned off, but the light will come on the camera if that's on. Now, not all of you have cameras that have that kind of technology. So the second thing is, I'm going to give you three ways. Way number one is the tally light. Way number two is that whoever is running the camera has to really pay attention, because you pick which camera you want to talk to, and then it's on the camera operator to follow and say, oh, because if I'm turned this way and you're sitting at the camera, you know I'm not talking to that camera, so all you have to do is switch to the camera that is over here. So that's way number two, is that the camera operator pays attention if we have more than one camera. And the third way is to just have an agreement between you and the camera operator that when I talk to people at home, we're always going to be on the center camera. I'm always going to look at camera 2 or whatever if you have more than one camera. So always go to that. And when I'm doing the introduction, when I'm saying hello, all that kind of stuff, always use camera 2, and that will help us to do that. The thing is people at home want to feel like you're talking to them.
You're talking to me?
Yes, Mr. De Niro, I'm talking to you. The second thing that I want you to think about doing is to make that camera a representation of the people who aren't physically in the space. A lot of us just think of it as a piece of technology. Friends, that camera is a portal into worship, and the beauty of that portal is that it's not just Sunday morning. It's all throughout the week. People worship on Sunday afternoon, they worship on Monday, they binge watch worship later. Here's the way that you can make that camera look real. This is one where I'm gonna encourage you to invest a little bit of money. If you can come up with like $8, you can order a whiteboard off of Amazon. And what I want you to do is look at your numbers from Sunday night after worship to Saturday night, and figure out how many people have watched your worship online or worshiped with you online. Write that number down. I had 103 on that board. That might be 30. That's 30 households. So that might be 4 times that number of people. If you will put that whiteboard near that camera, you will recognize that you're talking to 30 families. When you look at that camera, you'll be much more motivated to look at that camera if you know you're talking to people than to just think of it as a piece of technology that's in the room. And for some of you, you might say, well, my people don't really like having a camera in view, or we want to have it off to the side. I'll be honest with you, I hate when the cameras are off to the side, because it makes it way harder for you to look at the camera. Because then I have to completely turn, and that doesn't feel natural to the people in the room. Remember during COVID, we brought the cameras up close. We had them like in the front row and things like that. I think some of us need to go back to that. And if you go back to that, put those numbers on the back of the camera too, so that your congregation can see that last week, 130 households worshiped with us online. So I really want to encourage you to give yourself a reason to look at the camera. The last thing is this is similar to putting the numbers on there, but create some sort of physical reminder of the people not in the physical space. So I was doing a consultation with a church. I do these what I call secret worshiper consultations, and I actually the last 3 weeks I've done 2 of them, one in Florida and one in Ohio. And pre-pandemic, I only did them in person. When COVID hit, I got to do like 90 the next year because I could do them online, and I would meet with people through the week and we'd watch their worship together online. But I was doing a consultation with the church, and this church had 2 clergy people, and then they involved some of their leadership board on the call. And I was just walking through worship with them and talking to them, and I started talking to them about the importance of eye contact and making sure that they talk to people at home and making them feel like they're a part of it. And we were on a Zoom call like this, and a woman named Rhonda, saw her name down on the bottom of the screen, she said, "Can I say something real quick?" And I said, "Sure, Rhonda, go ahead." And Rhonda said, "Pastors, I hope you're listening to what he's saying." She said, "Jason, you don't know this, but they know this. I haven't been to church in person in about 6 months because I am receiving chemotherapy treatments, and it is dangerous for me to come to church. So I worship from home." And she said, "Pastors, I got to tell you, when you don't look at the camera, when you don't talk to me at home, it's real easy to turn it off. But there are some weeks you talk to me and you recognize that those of us who are not in that room are there, and you ask questions and you give us a chance to participate. Those are the weeks that I feel most engaged and I don't turn it off." And I said, "Help me, Rhonda. Help me, Rhonda. Thank you for those words." I said, "Here's what I want you to do, friends. And this is my encouragement to you too." I told my friends on that call, I said, "I want you to take a picture of Rhonda and put it up on your pulpit. It doesn't have to be something anybody sees but you. Put it on your music stand, music director. Put it somewhere where you're going to remember that you're talking to Rhonda and you're talking to the people in that room." And that little tweak can make all the difference. I would venture to guess that everybody on this call has at least one person that you know worships at home. And that person is probably beloved to your congregation. And if you will remember them, and you might even talk to them occasionally, you might say, "I wonder this morning what Rhonda might say about this." That one tiny tweak makes an enormous difference in people feeling like they are not just spectators of your worship, but they are a part of that worship. So those are all pretty easy, right? Not anything earth-shattering, not spending a bunch of money. Let's talk about the second thing. Number 2, it's really important that we watch our language in worship. Now, you are not using foul language in worship, I would imagine, but you are using sometimes bad language for folks that worship with you online. And so I want you to consider that you have 3 distinct audiences within your congregation that worship with you. Those 3 audiences are the people right now in person, right now online, and later online. So you've got people that are worshiping right now in the room. You've got live streamers who are worshiping with you right now at home, and you have people that worship after the fact. They worship later online. So often, all of our language favors only audience number 1. One of the ways we do this is we say, "Let's stand together and worship." Do you think anybody in their living room is standing and worshiping? Probably not. So one way you can include them is to say, for those of you physically gathered, I'm going to invite you to stand, and at home, find a posture that will allow you to fully participate as we worship together this morning. That acknowledges the people that aren't physically there. You might even say, for those of you in the room, I'm going to invite you to stand. For those of you worshiping online now or at a later time, find a posture that will allow you to fully participate in this moment. And you've just covered all 3 of those audiences. Be mindful also, this is not I wouldn't say this is a terrible practice, but some of us are we're not very intentional with our language around temporal language. So we'll say, good morning, happy Sunday. So glad you're here this morning on a wonderful Sunday. That's true for the people that are physically in the room. But the people online are not there. And some of them are going to worship later. So instead of saying, good morning, happy Sunday, you might say, welcome to worship. What a great day to worship. The people that are worshiping with you later, they know that it's not Sunday and all of that. But just be mindful of your temporal language. Sometimes you can open things up and make it feel like it's for everybody. Sorry.
Good morning. Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
All right. Thank you, Truman. Appreciate the help. So think about this as well, friends. There are things that you ask people to do in worship that sometimes are only really possible for the people that are physically gathered, and it's not that hard to tweak it so that you can make it for everybody. So prayer requests. We'll say, if you have a prayer request this morning, raise your hand and you can yell it out or write it on a card or whatever. Well, the people at home don't have cards in front of them. The people at home can't yell loud enough that you can hear them. So how about you say, if you're here in the physical space, you can write your prayer request on a card and put it in the offering plate, or the ushers are coming by. If you're at home right now, you could text it to this number and then have it be a number that you are comfortable having it texted to. And then when you're reading those on the physical cards, read those texts that come over as well. So you get to include the people who are not physically there. Or say, put it in the chat this morning, and then make sure that somebody's watching the chat. You could have somebody watching the chat. If you're somebody that says, does anybody have any prayer requests this morning? And you let people kind of yell those out. Have somebody watch the chat and yell out on behalf. Hey, we've got one in the chat here. Doesn't cost you anything. No money spent, no worship styles changed, no staff needed to be added, but you can make it so that the people who are not physically there can be a part of that moment in worship too. Offering, friends, when it comes to, remember, offering is an act of worship. Don't just say the ushers are coming by for the offering. The ushers aren't coming by my house for the offering. They're not coming by my hotel room when I'm out of town for offering. So you can very easily say, if you're here in our physical space, the ushers are coming by. If you're at home, you can use the QR code that we put on the screen or put in the chat this morning, or you can send your offering to our physical address, and you can put a graphic on the screen if you have that capability. And if you don't, I've even seen people that have printed up giant QR codes that they put on a poster board that you can put in the room that people can scan with their phone if they want to. So do allow people to participate in all the things that you do in worship. And there are 3 words that I would love for us to eliminate from our vocabulary. You might use these words, you might not, but I'm just going to throw them at you real quick. The first one is watching. Don't ever say if you're watching at home. Why not? Because hopefully people at home are worshiping. So if you're worshiping from home this morning, we are so glad you're part of our worship. But watching is passive. Watching means you're not really participating. You're watching the people in the room worship, right? So don't use that. Get in the habit of saying if you're worshiping at home. The second one is we should never refer to people as viewers. They are not viewers at home. Hopefully they're participants. And so how can they participate? We're going to talk about that in just a moment. And this last one is not a word that everybody uses, but it's a pet peeve of mine. And that is the word virtual. Worship online is not virtual. What is virtual? What is our virtual reality headset? It is a fake simulated experience. You're not really at the bowling alley. You're not really playing golf. You're not really in the spaceship. You're not really on the roller coaster. It's all a simulated experience. Friends, worship online, if you do it well, is actually worship. It's just digitally delivered. So I would encourage you not to use the word virtual worship, but instead to think of it as digital worship or hybrid worship is okay too. All right, moving on. Let's talk about creating a dialogue. This is my favorite one on the list, and I hope you'll really lean into this one. The idea is that you want to allow people at home to actually participate, and you can do that by inviting them to a dialogue. So I'm going to encourage you, if you're not already doing this, to make sure that the chat is turned on. If you're streaming on YouTube, you actually have to turn that feature on, and your people have to be subscribed to participate in the chat. But that's an easy thing to walk people through, and so you might walk them through that occasionally. If you're on Facebook, this is a little easier because it's already there, and then there are other platforms that are out there as well. But it's important that you not only use the chat, but you actually assign a chat host. Just like you would have a greeter at the door, you want to have a volunteer who is watching the chat. Because not if I show up to the chat and I try and chat and nobody talks to me, it's like walking into a church where no one will talk to me. And I've had it happen a number of times. We don't have time for me to go over this in detail. So I'm going to put it on the screen. You can take a picture of it or whatever. It's fully laid out in my book, but this chat strategy is the idea that you'd welcome everybody, you'd take questions from them, you'd reinforce what the pastor is saying. I would flesh this out more, but we don't have time. You post links to things like books you're talking about or things you want people to sign up for and so on. Here's a really great tip. Allow people to reflect on what you're talking about today. So this morning, our question is, what is something you're grateful for? Put it in the chat. Put it in the chat. What is something you're grateful for? Even the people in the room can put it in the chat. And then the last thing is to invite follow-up and so on. Now, here's the thing, friends. People will not put things in the chat and respond if you don't ever actually acknowledge their responses. So what I would do is say, we've had some great responses this morning to what people are grateful for. Here we have one from Harvey, and Harvey says he is grateful for grandchildren and that kind of thing by simply acknowledging. And did you see what just happened with Harvey? I mentioned his name. I said grandchildren. He gave me a thumbs up. He felt something in that moment because I said his name. So we can do that in the chat. Some of you still do the ritual of passing the peace. What if you said, let's pass the peace both physically and digitally? And so those of you online, pass the peace by greeting one another in the name of Christ right now in the chat. And those of you in the room, you can even get out your phones and say hi to those who are not here and pass the peace to them as well. Or wave the peace to the camera back there. Wave the peace to those who are not here in the physical space, and it will make them feel like they're a part of it. Also, remember, some people watch television on their TV. You might consider inviting them into what I call the dual screen experience. And that's the idea that you would say, if you're watching at home on a television, we'd invite you to get out your phone and chat with us as well. And in that chat, here's another tip for you. Put a link to the bulletin in the chat. There's so much that we refer to in the bulletin. All you have to do is put it in Dropbox or in Google Drive, or if you have somebody that knows how to do this, just set up a link on your website, and that way people can actually download the bulletin and physically participate with you and look at the hymn numbers and all those kinds of things, the announcements and so on. All right, let's see. I think I have time for this. So this is a church in Columbia, South Carolina that I absolutely love, a United Methodist church called Journey Church. And when I visited them, I love this. They put a graphic. This is not the graphic, but it's one that I made that is sort of meant to look like their graphic. So when you come into worship, they actually invite you to mute your phone, scan the QR code to get you in the chat, and then chat with people who are not physically here. So the pastor told me that their online congregation has grown to the point now where it's 3 times their physical attendance. So they've got 3 times more people worshiping online than they have in the physical space, and they have a pretty packed room in the physical space. So they did a couple things that I think you ought to consider stealing from them, borrowing from them. They are an African-American church, and so call and response is really important. And the pastor said, I need that feedback from my people. So here's a few things that they did that, again, I think you can adapt for your own setting. They have this section that they call the Amen section at their church. And at those 3 tables, they have people that sit there with cell phones, iPads, or laptops. And their whole job is to be social media ambassadors And what they do is they chat with folks during worship. So every person that comes into the chat gets a welcome, a hello, good morning. Now, again, this is an African American church, so someone might type in, "Preach it, Brother Ashford." And here's what they do. Somebody will physically yell out, "Preach it, Brother Ashford." And they're sitting at that table, so they give voice to the congregation. Now, some of you'd love it if people at your church would yell out, "Preach it, sister," or whatever. Some of you have to do a pulse check in the middle of worship just to make sure people are still alive. But in this church, that's a big thing. And so you might not have that, but what you could have, do you have a prayer request this morning? Put it in the chat, and someone might say, "We have a prayer request from Betty. Betty is asking for prayer about, a health concern," or something like that. And then you give voice to the people who are not physically there. The next thing that they did, I thought this was brilliant. They have a whiteboard back there behind those 3 tables, and they would write on the whiteboard in real time the number of people worshiping online. And when I was with them the first time, I've actually secret worshiped their church twice. They wrote down 25, then they erased it and it was 50, then they erased it. It got all the way up into the 130s. Now that's 130 households. So what that did for the morale of the church was that those people are not physically in the room, but they could see that we have most of our congregation. When you look at that number and you add it multiply it times 3 or 4, there's our whole congregation, even though this room is emptier than it used to be. And so, friends, I think if you can help your people get a picture of those who are not physically with you but are worshiping with you, that is great for the morale of your church, but also just shows the picture of who we are and how we worship in this present time. The last thing I want to share with you here is a clip from their service. This happened when I was with them. And Pastor George looked at the chat before he started preaching, and one of his congregants shared, "I wish I could be there this morning, but I'm having some back pain and I just can't make it to church physically." And I want you to see what happened in that worship experience. Listen to how he talks to this person. He's going to say, "When you came in this morning," but he meant into the chat, not into the worship space. Watch how he looks at the camera and talks to it. Watch how he talks to online. Watch what happens with the people when he begins to talk to this gal who didn't make it into the service.
You don't have to look like what you've been through. Miss Sarah, you came in this morning and you said, "Rev, the devil was riding me last week, but I already knew because I read the prayer call." And I said, "Miss Sarah, your hip may have been hurting and your shoulder may have been hurting." I wish y'all were here to see Miss Sarah. Put the third eye on Miss Sarah. And I said, "Miss Sarah, you don't look like what you've been through. You look like God has made a difference in your life." And I stopped by to tell somebody online, if you just get a little bit closer, you can see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. If you dare to get closer, just to talk with Jesus will make it all right.
Now, I told George if he could just muster a little more energy when he preaches. That was my only real critique, was that he needed to bring the energy level up a little bit. But did you see what happened there, friends? When they began to talk about Sarah, that crowd got up on their feet because they love Sarah. They know Sarah's story. And so here's what if you're a note taker, write down, cross-pollinate my congregations. How can you cross-pollinate your physical congregation and your digital congregation so they both feel like they're part of the worship experience? I would suggest to you that was not just an important moment for Sarah. Sarah was at home saying, "Wow, pastor's talking about me," but it was an important moment for that congregation who felt Sarah's presence in that moment, even though she wasn't physically with them. Here's one little trick you can do to cross-pollinate your congregations. If you have somebody that worships from home, maybe you've got a snowbird that lives in Florida part of the time, or somebody that's in the nursing home that can't make it there physically, but your congregation loves. Here's a tip for you. On Wednesday, maybe you're using the lectionary. on Wednesday, you schedule a Zoom call with them and you say, hey, I would like for you to read our scripture for this Sunday. So this is the scripture. I'm going to record the call. All you have to do is record the scripture, and then you can just chop off the part where you were given the instruction. You'll download that Zoom clip of your homebound person, and then that Sunday, you can play the video of your homebound person. And so somebody that's not physically there is participating in your worship, and that will mean something to both that person and to your congregation who is not physically there. And it's not really all that difficult. I would imagine all of you at some point have hit record on a Zoom call, and you know how to do that. It's not hard, I promise. I hope those tips are helpful. Create a dialogue with your congregation and make them feel like they're a part of it. That's how they go from watchers to worshipers. That's how they go from viewers to participants, is when you create a dialogue. One more thing I forgot to say, and I should have said this during our language, but be careful on your benediction. Because sometimes on your benediction, you will say, as we go from this place, the people who are worshiping online are not at that place. As we go from this place or wherever we're worshiping from and whenever we're worshiping, and then you can give that benediction. Just remember that those little language tweaks make all the difference, because if you say, as we go from this place and I'm worshiping at home, I'm excluded from that. I'm not at that place. I'm not physically with you right now. And all it takes is a little bit of intentionality to go to the next level. All right, moving on. Can we do this in 12 minutes? We're going to try. Assign an online advocate. Let me run that again. Maybe. There we go. Assign an online advocate. So you have lots of advocates in the room. They will get on you for anything you do if you change one little thing in worship. You did the announcements in the wrong place, Pastor. I'm calling the DS. Or, you didn't do the prayer in the right spot, or you this, that, or the other thing. The passing of the peace was not long enough, whatever. You have lots of advocates in the room, but many of you don't have any advocates for online. So I'm going to encourage you to pick somebody that you know worships not in the physical space with you, but online, to be an advocate for those who worship online and to give you feedback. And let's talk about what those things are. I'm going to skip a little bit and give you a multiple on one screen. So just for time's sake. So here are some questions that I think you ought to consider having them, empowering them to ask. First is, what about this experience is working and not working online? There are all kinds of things that we do in the room that sometimes, like a children's sermon, sometimes you have a little prop and it's so small I can't even see it because your camera's all the way in the back of the room. How am I supposed to know what's going on? Take a picture of that thing and put it on the screen and let people at home see it too. Just ask whatever. Yeah. Did you all take your snapshot of this? I want to make sure you get it, and I'll come back on camera here. You got to be careful about people talking on camera without a microphone. Sometimes here's what we have happen. We'll let people give announcements or share joys and concerns or whatever. And the person up front has a mic on, but the people in the room don't. So here's what you hear. And you can't make out anything I'm saying, right? But you hear this end of it. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. And at home, you're like, what is going on right now? What are they talking about? It's important that you repeat the things that people say because you have a mic. It's important. Maybe you have a roving microphone that is out there for that. But the question to ask is, what is not working online that is happening in the room? Sorry, I need to pause on that again. Hold on one sec. There we go. All right, number 2, does it feel like they're actually talking to me? We already talked about that. Are we using language that includes people at home in the experience? Can I see and hear everything? Remember, in the room, you have your own cameras. You can turn your head anyway, and you can turn your ear and hear things better. Online, you only get what the camera shows you. And then finally, do I feel like a valued member? It's not finally, actually. I'm going to show you 2 more. Do I feel like they're actually including me in the language? And then the last 2 here, yes. Okay. Are they using the chat feature effectively? We just talked about that. And what are the next steps? It's important, friends, that you include people in next steps too. So some of you will say, fill out your Connect card. Well, a Connect card's a physical piece of paper. Are you going to send that to me in the mail, or Or am I filling out a Connect form online? So if you're in the room, you have a Connect card. If you're at home, fill out that Connect form. We just put it in the chat. You just click on that link and you fill it out. Some of us don't think about the fact that we say, hey, on your way out, sign up for the trip. There's a clipboard back there for our mission trip or our whatever, our bake sale, our whatever. Friends, how do the people online do that? How can they participate as well? Some of us have physical things that we're doing, and that's the only way to sign up, and you're excluding some portion of your congregation if you don't create a digital way for them to participate as well. All right, moving on. We have to develop new rites and rituals. We have lots of rites and rituals, and we figured them out for how to do them in the physical space, but how do we do them online? I was just at a service this past weekend, secret worshiping at a church in Columbus, Ohio, and at the beginning of the service, I don't know if this was the lectionary week or what, but they were remembering baptism. It was the story of the woman at the well, and they wanted people to remember their baptism. So I thought this was brilliant. The person that was the preacher for the sermon, she did a great job in the room, and she said, friends, here in our physical space, we have bowls of water, and on your way out, I invite you to put your hand in that water and remember your baptism. Those of you at home, you might consider getting a bowl of water and filling it up and just touching that water to remember your baptism as well. We're not too far out. We're getting closer all the time to Palm Sunday. Some of you will have physical palm branches in your space. I have even done a thing where I created a digital palm branch that was a PDF file that people could download and cut out that palm branch if they wanted to have a palm branch to participate from home. You just make a little pattern. Today's craft time, so if you're worshiping with us online, go to the chat. We just put in the chat a PDF for make your own palm branch. You can cut it out during worship, and then you can wave your palm branch too. Or you have some people that you know worship online, and you know their address. You could send them palm branches in the mail, or you could have a team of people that drive around Ash Wednesday. You could deliver ashes to people's house who are homebound if you wanted to, if you were going to do a service like that. So I just want to get you thinking, how can we do this in a way that is both digital and physical so that we're not just thinking about the people that are physically with us? This is a can of worms. I don't know what the rules are in your conference. They seem to be different in all the different conferences I talk to. So definitely go with your Episcopal leadership on this one. But when it comes to communion, you have to at least acknowledge that some people are not physically in the space. So I know in some conferences I work with, the rules are that you are allowed to bless those elements online. If your bishop does not allow for that, don't do that. But if there are allowances for that, just make sure that you tell people at the beginning of worship, grab some bread, some juice, some water, and when we bless the elements here, we're praying over your elements too. Or you might say, some of you, next week is a communion week, and if you want to participate, we have pre-consecrated, we prayed over the elements, and we will drop them in the mail to you, or you can stop by the church and pick them up. Or believe it or not, I still know one church that invites people who worship online to come by the church for half an hour after worship. They do drive-by communion where people can drive right up and receive their communion elements and worship online. All right, let's see. We are nearing the end here. Number 6. There's more I could say about that last one, but we got to keep going. So keep iterating. Did I not do number 5? Did I skip 5? Somebody didn't put...
No, you did 5. That was develop new rites and rituals.
Okay. All right. Okay. I saw somebody ask for 5. So, okay. Sorry. I'm going fast. I'm trying to get us all done by 8.
And it's
all
okay.
right.
We don't have a hard stop at 8, so you're okay. You can breathe.
Okay. All right. Well, we may go over by a couple minutes, but I want to give you a chance to ask any questions that you have. So, the number 6 is to remember to keep iterating. Keep trying new things. Here's what I think we've lost, and I'm a little sad about it. During COVID, you all were so experimental. You were like, oh, we can't have people in the physical building. Let's put the camera over here and see what that's like. And what if we took our prayer requests in the chat? And what if we did this? Some of you just need to reclaim some of the things that you did during COVID because they worked really, really well. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, although I'm in D.C. at the moment. But not far from where I live is a business center that was started by a man named Clay Mateel, the Mateel family. And Clay is known, he actually passed away a couple years ago, but Clay is known for being the person that put the Imes Pet Food Company on the map. They were from the Dayton area and became a national brand after he kind of took them to the next level. And in the business center that is not far from where I live, there's a quote that hangs there, and I just love this quote, and I think it applies to the church and to what happened during COVID and what I think should happen again. Here's what he said: "The only difference between a rut and a groove is how long you've been in it." Think about that for a minute. The only difference between a rut and a groove is how long you've been in it. Some of us found a new groove when COVID hit. We figured out how to do online, and we experimented, and we tried new things until we got something that worked. But some of us kind of lived into that thing that worked for so long that it became kind of tired and it became a rut. And some of us have been in that rut for a while. So I just want to encourage you to reclaim some of that innovative spirit that you had during COVID. The truth is that when COVID ended, some of us just tried to go back to the old way we did everything. My old mentor and friend Mike Slaughter once put it like this: "If you put it up for a vote, the people will always vote to go back to Egypt," which I think is a great way of thinking about this. Some of us just want to go back to the way it used to be, and we want to ignore. I mean, we went through the wilderness during COVID. But I think some of us are more uncomfortable in this new hybrid world that we live in because, and that's the promised land, we were more comfortable in the captivity because we knew the rules of captivity of the way that we used to do things. So I just want to really encourage you to lean into where we are living today, and really take advantage of it as much as you can. And so I think that's helpful. So here are some of the ways that I would encourage you to keep iterating. The first recommendation I have for you is to get your team together. Some evening, maybe you order pizza or something, and watch one of your worship services from beginning to end. And ask yourself, where do I feel disconnected? What parts to me feel like they drag, or I didn't explain things, or I couldn't hear anything that they were saying, that I was saying in that moment? Or some of us don't ever look at what it's like to worship online. So that's one tip. The second tip is to watch somebody else's worship as a team that you don't, maybe from another faith tradition, maybe watch a non-denominational service or a Catholic service or something. Where do you feel lost? It's sometimes hard to see it in ourselves, but when we look at something else, we might say, I don't have any idea what's going on right now. And then we realize, oh, wait, we do a thing kind of like that too. I grew up in the first part of my life. My parents came to faith in the Assemblies of God denomination. And that never really quite did it for me. But I went to a friend invited me to a youth group in a United Methodist church. And I loved the youth group. And I remember we had like a lock-in or something. And so you don't go home that day. So I was sitting in their worship service, and I remember somebody read scripture, and at the end of it, they said, "The word of God for the people of God." And all the people together said, because I had no idea what they just said. And I remember, like, for a while, I would listen real close. What were they saying? And I thought, the next week it was, "Thanks be to Todd." Is that the name of the pastor? Who's Todd? And then finally I figured out what they were saying. But nobody ever explained that to me. I had to just figure it out. And there are a lot of things that we do in our worship that outsiders don't understand. We don't say who we are. Like if you get up and just start talking, "Good morning, how you doing? Am I the pastor? Am I a lay person? What's my role?" You're never going to know online when you have a visitor. You can't see them, right? So I think we ought to be in the habit of giving orientation and explaining what we're doing and saying who we are. So say your name and your title. Pastors, every week, I think you ought to tell them, "I'm Pastor Jason. I'm the lead pastor here at Acme United Methodist Church, and we're glad you're worshiping with us today." Your lay people ought to do that as well. It really honors your guests who don't know who anybody is. I could get off on a whole different topic. I teach a whole seminar on hospitality. We don't have time for that tonight. But I do think that that's one of the iterations that we ought to consider is inviting people into what we're doing. All right, and number 7, there's so much more I could say. We just don't have time. The last one is just to continue to cast vision for your hybrid worship. Some of us are still doing hybrid, and we don't know why we're doing hybrid anymore. We don't know the why behind our hybrid. You might think, what do you mean by that, Jason? We know our why. Here's why you started, some of you. You started because COVID happened, and you couldn't be in your buildings. And some of you never figured out your why past, we're allowed to be in our buildings now. Why are we still doing this? And the thing is when you figure out your why, your what and your how becomes so much stronger because you have a purpose behind what you're doing. Your purpose for hybrid worship can't be that we had a pandemic. The pandemic is over. So now why do you do it? I want to suggest to you that you do it because online worship is like the taster spoon for in-person worship. People will taste you online, and if they like what you're doing, they'll show up and buy the whole cone because they think you're doing a good job, and they like what they experience online and so on. And there's a ton of other things I could say. Here's what I want you to keep in mind, and I will wrap it because I know we're kind of at our time. But a couple of final thoughts for you. If you are still resisting this idea of hybrid, I know there are people that are, I want you to consider that Paul was a hybrid minister. Paul's ministry was hybrid. What do you mean, Jason? There was no internet back then. Remember that Paul, all throughout Acts, is physically with people, and he's preaching to them, and they're physically gathered. And then what happens? He finds himself in prison, and he begins to write these letters. And he's not physically with them anymore, but he is still communicating the message and leading the church from afar. And you know what Paul says constantly in his letters over and over? I long to be with you. I wish we were together. I prefer to give you this message in person. But since we can't do that, hear these words, right? And here's the other thing I want you to consider. Paul's writings were for the audience that he was speaking to in that day, but they resonate just as much today as they did on the day that he did that. Friends, that's true for your worship too, if you're intentional about it. So here's a way to think about this. Make your worship here and there and now and later. Here and there and now and later. What do I mean? Right here, right now on Sunday morning. But also, not right here, but there, at home, in your hotel room, on a business trip, whatever. So it's both here and there. It's right now on Sunday morning as we're doing it, but also remember that it's tomorrow and it's next week and it's next year when somebody finds this and it speaks to them. And if you'll start to think about that, your worship will take on so much more depth and meaning, and it will be hybrid that is not just about doing what you do for the people in the room on Sunday and forgetting that other people will encounter it later. And my last 2 bullets here for you. I want to encourage you to regularly invite people to come physically worship with you. Don't ridicule them for worshiping online. Hey, you lazy bums, get your butt to church. It's the only way it counts. Don't take on that mentality. But here's what I think you ought to do. Maybe once a month or once a quarter. Hey, if you're worshiping with us online, we are so glad that you're spending time with us. But if you haven't been here to our physical space in a while, we would love, or if you've never been here, we'd love to meet you. We'd love to look you in the eye. We'd love to shake your hand. We'd love to hear you sing alongside of us. It's just a different experience when you come here. And so consider coming to worship with us in person. That's something I think we all ought to be doing on a regular basis. And then the last thought is that I want to encourage you to collect the stories of the impact of your hybrid worship. I would bet that many of you have a story that you've heard along the way. You're at the grocery store and somebody said, Pastor, I really loved your sermon. You're like, oh, I haven't seen you at church in a while. Oh, I worship with you online. Or I had somebody tell me that they so value the online worship because they have very bad cataracts and bad eyesight. And the person said, Pastor, and this is the first time I've ever known what my pastor looks like, because I can put the phone right up by my eyes and see what you look like. I could never get as close to you as I would need to be to see your face, and it be comfortable for either of us. I had somebody say that an elderly woman would come sit in church on the front row with her phone streaming in worship, and she would read the captions, and she'd look up and she'd read the captions, and she said, I love coming to get my hugs and see my people, but I love that through this technology I can also hear and see better than I could without it. So I want you to find those stories and tell them, so that your congregation can understand the value of the hybrid worship that you're doing. So do you see how this is not about spending more money? It's not about changing your worship style. It's not about adding staff. It is really about intentionality. And how can we, I bet every person on this call could do one or two of the things that I suggested to you tonight, and your hybrid worship would go to the next level. You don't have to have fancy equipment. It doesn't have to be about being excellent or perfect or any of those things. It really is about making people feel like they're a part of it and not just spectators of what those in the room are doing. So that's, we squeezed it all into an hour and 7 minutes. So I want to give you a chance to ask any questions that you have. But I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight, and I hope you heard something that was helpful. So you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat or unmute or whatever you'd like to do if you want to ask a question or two before we go. So Craig asks, where will we be able to find the recording of the session? Heather will get that to you because the conference is recording it.
Yeah, I've got to talk to Benjamin, but hopefully we'll find a way to get that out to everybody. Yep.
All right. Gwyneth, did I see you raise your hand?
Yeah.
Good to see you.
And, good to see you too. We're all praying for Madeline.
Thank you.
So, I'm serving 3 churches and they all do hybrid worship a little differently. And one of my churches has stayed with Zoom, and which is really cool because we have those people sometimes read scripture. They're, the screen flips to them for those who are in the room. We see everybody who's on Zoom, and they're, invited to voice prayers so they can actually speak and we can hear them in the room. The problem is there isn't any way for like a visitor to check out the church online. And I've been thinking of the options. I've tried to figure out how to live stream from Zoom because I can do it from my computer, but I can't figure out the church system is not allowing that.
Huh.
So, I mean, I don't know whether there's like somebody tech wiser than I am in the conference who could help with that, or maybe we just post the Zoom recording after the fact and people have the option of either joining live on Zoom or they watch the recording later, because we're not posting those. We're just saying email if you'd like a recording.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a way to figure that out. I don't know the answer to that, but I oftentimes somebody in the conference office might in the communications department or something might have an answer for you. The other thing I might ask ChatGPT or Gemini, tell ChatGPT or Gemini the problem you're having, and it might be able to help you solve the technical issues, because I use it all the time to figure out things that won't work on my computer. I do think that it might. What's that? Oh, okay. There you go.
Steve Dale apparently might be able to help. So
okay.
I can write down his name.
I think the solution, though, of posting your worship after the fact, and then putting some instructions for if you'd like to join us for the next worship service, you can do so by requesting a Zoom link at this email address, and people could put that in or whatever. I do think that's the downside. There are upsides and downsides to doing it in the way you're doing it, because you do have a sense of community when everybody's on the call together, but it does make it really hard for somebody who's not already in the fold to participate in it. I think I might do that, or I might put together, if you have the time to do a little edit, I don't know if people would sit and watch a whole Zoom call worship experience because it's a little different. It's different live than it would be recorded, but I might try and put together a little, um, short podcast length version of it and say if you'd like to join us. And I might even say that like at the end of the worship service to look right at the camera and say, if you've watched our worship online or you've worshiped with us online, we would love to have you join us. Just simply put a link, and that way it's built into the clip that I would watch that would give me the instructions for how to participate.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, Heather, hands up there.
I'm advocating for the chat. Here I am. What did you call this? I'm the online
Chat
advocate
host?
here.
Yes, there you go.
Anyways, Paula asked a question, and I'm gonna give one possible answer while you think of a much better answer. Paula asked, "How do you help people who have trouble using technology at home?" You're going to have a better answer, Jason, I know, but I do want to tell people a lot of our towns have public access television, and those guys are dying for content. My husband works for our town's Sudbury Public TV, and so when COVID happened, he started screening the services, and the director of the TV station was like, "Yeah, put them on Sundays," and then another church sent theirs. So even if you have people who are really bad at technology, but you can send your service to the local access TV, that might be one place to watch it.
Yeah, that's great. I love that suggestion. So one of my favorite stories that I heard during the pandemic was a pastor was telling me that he got assigned to a church that is in a retirement community. He said, "I don't have like my youth group is in their 60s, so." He didn't really say that, but I thought that'd be funny to say. But he said, "I basically asked one Sunday, how many of you in this room feel like you're comfortable with technology, or you?" He said, "Out of the whole room, and I don't know how big the room was, but let's say it's 50 people." He said, "I had 3 people who raised their hand, and I made the 3 of those people and myself a team." And what we did was we allowed people to sign up, and we would come to their house and we would show them. At that time they were on Zoom. We actually installed basically like a startup item on their computer that would make Zoom come up right away, and they created little laminated cards that would tell them the 3 things they had to do to get on. And basically they let people sign up. And he said, "My congregation told me they have never felt so cared for than they did during that season where we were showing up at their house and training them on how to do it." So you could potentially create a little Geek Squad team, some folks that could go out and train people. You might also consider offering classes at your church. So, Wednesday night at 5, we're going to have a 101 basic technology class, and it's going to help you learn how to participate in our worship in a different way, that kind of thing. My son, when he was in high school, was in a technology class, and I think you could tap into your high schools, your colleges, your whatever, and those students could get credit for helping put together a program that would help people be more technically savvy. And so those would be my suggestions for you, that you use volunteers and you let people sign up and those kind of things. Let's see. Any other questions for technology assistance? Yeah, there we go. Tony says, reach out to your youth, gives them purpose, engagement. I love that. And I think it's neat when we create mentor relationships where some of our older folks can be mentors to the young people, but the young people can also mentor the older folks. And it's a great opportunity to create relationships in your church. Anything else?
One
Go
other
ahead.
question, Jason.
Yep.
Just in terms of online safety, right now, for those who are joining online, I have an email that I put out, and that has the link to the bulletin that's sitting in a Google Drive folder. And so we just upload a different bulletin to the folder each week.
Sure.
I'm hesitant to put that link on our website or somewhere like that for fear of getting hacked and that kind of thing. Well, just
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on that? How safe is Google Drive to just put public links out there?
Yeah, well, I mean, anything that's public can be downloaded by anyone. So there's a couple things you can do. One would be that you can password protect some of those links so that you give people the password and they would have to know it. That's something you'd probably have to speak in the worship service if you want to download this week's bulletin. You know, you put this in. Second thing that I've seen is that some people will alter their bulletin a bit to not include first and last name. So it might be, you know, Harriet S. needs prayer or whatever, and most of us know who Harriet is, so we don't need the Smith at the end or whatever. So I've seen people do that. I've also seen, this is not about bulletins, but I've also seen where people will sometimes do their whole worship service and then not do the prayer time on the stream, but say, we're going to move over to our Zoom prayer meeting now. And they would end the stream, but then everybody would come to Zoom and they would do that, and it wouldn't be recorded, so that those sensitive things that we're talking about don't become part of the stream and all of that. You can also, if you do your prayer in the right, like if you decide to do the prayer at the end, you can very easily go into Facebook Creator Studio and just after the service is over, trim off the back end of it so that you get the prayer in a live stream of worship, but then after worship it's not archived, and we don't include that for all of eternity. So those are a couple solutions. Any other questions before we go? Did anybody get one idea that they're going to be able to implement when we're all done? All right, 3 of you did. That's great. I'm just kidding. Well, friends, I hope this was helpful. I have gotten to do a lot of work with your conference over the years, so it's good to be back. And hopefully someday I'll come back in your physical space and we can meet each other face to face. But if you have any questions that arise after this, Heather has my info. If you want to send her any questions that you have, she can forward them on to me rather than complicating things, and I'll be happy to answer questions if you have them. All right?
Jason, thank you so very much for all of this, really giving us things to think about and practical techniques to try. This was just fantastic. So again, I want to encourage everybody. I put the name of Jason's book in the chat. Please check it out so you can have more than an hour's worth of these thoughts. And as a reminder, the next worship Zoom session that Board of Discipleship is hosting is Tuesday, April 14th, 7 o'clock with Nelson Cowan on intergenerational worship and including children in the worship service. So, yeah. Hope your daughter's feeling better. Hope you get some rest and eventually get back home. Harvey, is that a question?
He was just saying goodbye. Thanks, Harvey, and thank you for the comments there. And yeah, thank you for the prayer for my daughter as well. All right. Well, everybody take care. And remember, this Sunday, look at the camera and talk to people who are worshiping with you, all right? It's an easy little tweak, all right?
And
All right. Thank you all. Take care.